The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to the first in a new series of webinars from D-Link. Today we're going to be talking about switches and how using managed switches can help drive your business forward. My name's Alan Jones. I'm the marketing manager here at D-Link, and I'm joined by two guests I'll introduce in a second. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So when it comes to your business network, switches are the building blocks for communication. As a business grows, it adds to the number of devices used at any one time. With the increase in devices leading to a more complex network, a proactive business should look at upgrading their network in line with the increased demand. Installing and upgrading your switching infrastructure will help regulate your business network, but what category of switch is best for you? In this webinar, we will talk you through the advantages and disadvantages of unmanaged, smart, and managed networks. Help you better understand and target your customers with the kind of switch they will need, and provide you with details on why D-Link switches can provide a great solution in all these cases. I'm joined today by Mark Carty, who's one of the sales managers here at D-Link. Mark's going to do the initial few slides, and then as we get a bit more technical, I've also got our technical pre-sales engineer, Craig Kirby, here with me.
Hi.
Introduce yourself, guys.
Good morning.
Yeah, hi, ready to go?
Ready to go? Okay. So the first slide is just a quick introduction to some products. I will hand you over now to Mark.
So D-Link's product portfolio ranges from a wide range of switching infrastructure products. Then we've got things like 4G routers and dongles, and things that will help you and assist you with connectivity. And then, as you probably can see on the slide, we've got a wide range of wireless products, ranging from things like our covers to our business grade access points. If you guys have got any questions or queries on any of this that you see, or if you're interested in seeing things, you're more than welcome to drop myself or Craig a quick line, and we're quite happy to run through the wider range with yourselves to give yourself a better idea or understanding of how these work and where these could fit into what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah. In upcoming webinars, we'll be talking you through, you can see there in the Integrated Business Solutions nucleus, we'll have an upcoming webinar on that, so if anyone's interested, you can go and sign up for that on our events page. But now into the meat.
So what are switches? Switches are key components for pretty much all business networks. Any business or any organisation, small or large, looking to connect multiple PCs, printers, if you're looking to build a wireless network, or if you're trying to make a solution or make a network that connects to each other, will require some form of a switch. Switches will allow you to send information from pictures to emails across the network and to other machines. So ideally, all businesses will need this sort of product. They come in all shapes and different sizes. Sort of the devices that you can connect to these products are ranging from things like light bulbs to things like CCTV cameras. And as you can see on the diagram here, we've listed things like light bulbs and computers and wireless access points and sound systems. As we advance, more and more devices will be needed to connect to a network. So things like your domestic home products, things like your fridges and your cookers, and then you've got things in businesses like door access controls, you've got things like business grade phones, you've got things like kettles that want to be connected. Everything will need at some point an IP or a connectivity towards an internet. The sort of customers that use these devices, so we've got things like retail, so your Tesco's or your supermarkets and your Sainsbury's and all these type of people. More and more of these sorts of organisations are relying on technology, whether to connect CCTV cameras so they can monitor where you are in a store, not only for security purposes, but for things like trading or for tracking purposes to see where your eye lines are. Things like Costas and the coffee shops of this world are now using technology to keep customers in there for longer. Then we go and we look at the hospitality sector. So things like hotels and football stadiums and restaurants, more and more technology is being used within these organisations to make them more efficient in the way they work. Education is a good example. More and more technology is being used in there, from smart boards. All children nowadays have things like tablets and smart devices attached to them. And as technology gets better and the kids have better understanding of this, more and more schools will need technology to assist with the learning.
I think just to add on to that, the key point of this slide is to recognise that all of these people will have an increase in need for switches. So if you have any of these in the portfolio, if you have any of them that you maybe think need an upgrade, maybe you have some restaurants that are expanding, all that kind of stuff, then they can definitely benefit from upgrading their switching networks to provide them with more security and just a better network overall. Move on.
So as applications and programs get bigger, there's going to be a need for speed. So customers will need to look at faster and more powerful networks. Commonly in the industry at the moment, we see these four speeds here. 10100, represented by the snail, gigabit, which is pretty much the standard speed across most networks nowadays. And then we've got schools and organisations like graphics houses and things like that looking at the 10 gigabit, and then we've got 40 gig. Why? Applications get bigger and more complicated, more devices being added to your network, things like access points and IP cameras. And as companies and organisations like schools introduce bring your own device policies, we are going to need faster and more sophisticated networks to handle the demand that is required.
We're now going to hand over to Craig. Craig's going to do a bit more of the technical stuff, starting with going through the three different types of switches, and then we'll move on to some office plans, typical what we recommend for businesses.
Yeah, so our portfolio at D-Link is split up into a few different types of devices, starting at the unmanaged level. Now, where would you put an unmanaged switch? It's very likely going to be on the edge of a very small environment. So maybe you're a small business and you have a few PCs, maybe you've got sort of 6 or 7 PCs, and maybe you need a few extra. You could possibly start looking at an unmanaged switch, which would eventually connect back to something like a router, and it'll allow you to plug in some extra devices and allow a bigger network to start communicating. Now, an unmanaged switch doesn't have anything particular in terms of the logic, so you plug it in and it all just works at a layer 2 level. Nice and simple, you don't have to configure it, you just plug it in and off you go.
Just to interrupt a second, if you do have any questions on anything that we're saying, feel free to drop them through. We can do a quick question and answer session at the end. I know that we've got a couple of questions from some listeners already to take care of. So Mark and Craig have got their work cut out.
Yeah, so just to go back on that, Alan, sorry, with the unmanaged switches, they do come with certain features. So we can do things like power over Ethernet. Power over Ethernet would be where you can plug in access points and cameras. So we do have switches that are specifically designed for that, as well as data connectivity. So we can start customizing things as well. But generally, it's just a switch that's basically going to connect a few extra devices. Now, if we want something a little bit more manageable, if we want to start being able to actually manipulate traffic on a network, we'd need to start looking at smart switches. Now, the difference between smart switches, it will come with a web interface, and that web interface will allow you to actually log into the device and start changing settings that allow you to start breaking your traffic down. And we do something what we call segmentation. Now, segmentation is something that you want to do on a larger network, or maybe something a little bit beyond small business or the larger scale of side of things. And what that will allow you to do is have extra layers of security. So let's say, for example, you're a small business and you have two teams. One of these teams might be an art department and another team might be accounting and things like that. And you want to keep your accounting traffic separate from all of your rest of your network. You segment them down into VLANs, and that means that you can actually keep all of that traffic in one area without connecting to everything else. So it's really essential for today's kind of environment, especially if you're looking at data manipulation.
And we're going to touch on that a little bit later again with the medium-sized business recommendation.
Absolutely.
So now we'll move on to the most powerful example, managed switches.
Absolutely, the managed switches. So why would you use a managed switch? It's not just for big, large networks. You might have a smaller network, but with a more key feature set. So where I mentioned security, maybe you are a small company, but you have extra layers of security that you want to implement. Or maybe that you want to do something a little bit more different with your traffic. So we mentioned hospitality in the past, in a few slides ago. Now, hospitality, you might be a hotel and you want to provide certain services like IPTV, VoIP communications, things like that. The best way to break that down is with a managed switch, because then you can start pushing out traffic in certain different ways. You can start manipulating it, and you can also implement things like ACL rules, which is a layer 3 function, and that basically means you can have security lists, who's allowed on your network, who's not allowed on your network, and other features that will allow you to actually make your network much more smarter and more efficient.
Brilliant. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the D-Link range of managed switches.
So, like I said, we've got our managed switches. We start off with fast Ethernet, and then we go gigabit Ethernet, 10 gig and 40 gig. So that's the speeds that you're looking at. So the first thing you can look at on your network is speed. What kind of speeds do you require? How many switches are you going to put in? Do you need them to be stackable solutions? And all of these things are the questions that you generally ask yourself first. So here we've got our split into layers and functionality, and we can see at the top end we got DXS 5000, which is something that you would put in a data center level. And then if you go down the other side, we have our DES products, which means that we do our D-Link Ethernet, fast Ethernet switches. And our feature set is really going to be down to what you need, but there's room for maneuverability. You might want to put in a certain core switch that's a little bit more powerful than what you currently have or your current needs, because you intend to grow in the future. So there's a lot we can help with in terms of the managed switches range.
So yeah, so as you can see, everything on from the left to right gets slightly faster, and everything as you go up goes up in the feature stack. So the DXS is the top range data center kind of version.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just two quick examples: not switches, light switches, or Nintendo switches. We don't sell either of those products here at D-Link, unfortunately. Okay. So I'm going to move on to just a quick example of a network for a small office. This is one that even I can understand. Craig is just going to run through.
Yeah, so at D-Link we do full solutions. So we go right from the router gateway, right to the switches, and then to cameras, and we do all sorts of connectivity and devices that we can put in. So here's an example of a small business. So you generally start at a core switch. Now sometimes you might be a small enough company that you can get away with one switch. Yeah. It's very unlikely, to be honest, because more and more data requirements, there's more needs for things that need to be connected. So adding an additional switch means that you can link those switches together. So here we've got two of our DGS 1210s that are connecting all of our devices. So all of our PCs, our cameras, and our VoIP phones as well are powered by these. So we can see that the cameras and the phones are actually powered by a single Ethernet cable that comes out to them. So you don't have to have power supplies connected into blocks or going to your wall sockets for those devices.
Brilliant. And so in this case as well, we've recommended the DGS 121028, which isn't a PoE switch, it's just a normal switch.
That's right. Because you're just plugging in things that aren't actually powered, you don't need to have a PoE switch there. So this is a simple example of having a core switch and then having an edge switch. This is the most simple example we can offer.
And of course that would save the end users some money to not have a PoE that they don't essentially need.
You would need to look at the budgets for that power requirement.
Excellent. So the next one is a medium-sized company, gets a little bit more complicated.
That's right, yep. So we're going up and out. We're adding in some different teams and areas and divisions to our company. So here we can still see we've used 1210s, and that's what we class as our edge. And that's still designed to connect all of the PCs and all of the phones, and probably some cameras on the edge as well if you have some IP surveillance cameras. But because the amount of traffic is starting to build up now, we have 3 switches, and that's a lot of devices that we want to connect. So if we all push that into one core switch, we need to make sure that that core switch is able to handle all of that traffic between each other. So here we've gone up a level. We've gone up to a DGS 1510, and that's a Smart Pro switch. And what that means is that it's got more bandwidth that you're able to push through it. It can handle things, and there's a few more features as well. So, for example, that's actually a 10 gig switch, and you can start placing in 10 gig and start thinking about how you want to cable 10 gig in the future as well.
So a better switch as the basis for the network.
A bigger core for a larger network.
Yeah, and then obviously you can set up between the 3 VLANs a separation of data there.
So a VLAN stands for Virtual Local Area Network. And it basically means it's just a group of devices that can communicate to each other. And you can choose whether you want VLANs to communicate. So, for example, you might have one VLAN with a shared printer, and then 2 other teams, and they can share that resource, but not necessarily talk to each other in terms of your PCs.
Brilliant. In terms of GDPR, not sharing data between your sales division and your finance division.
Absolutely, yes. It's
got to be paramount for businesses, especially in today's. Now we're going to move on to a larger thing, and Craig is definitely going to have to talk through this one because this is where it gets a bit more complicated.
It looks more complicated, but it's not. It's not really. All we're doing is we're adding in bigger switches, and we have some of these features that you see here are actually in some of the smaller smart features as well. So you don't necessarily, this isn't just going to be for a campus enterprise per se, for the actual technology, but we'll begin at the bottom. So the access layer, that's what we was looking at a moment. And when we say access, that's really the edge. And that's where we would plug in all of our PCs and our phones and our WebSockets there. Now, what we like to think about when we start building a network is redundancy. Redundancy is very important because business continuity is absolutely paramount. If you have a website, for example, and that goes down because one of your switches has stopped working, that's money. That's real money that you're going to lose. So you want to try and keep your network running all the time. So what we can implement is different layers. And using those layers, we can make multiple connections to those layers so that if one device goes down, we can go another way to get to our internet or wherever we want to go. So we've connected our edge to our aggregation layer. So let's say, for example, we had 1210s or DGS 3120s. We can then start thinking about how we want them to connect. And at the aggregation layer, we have extra links. So what we can do is we can create a backbone between the edge and the core and the aggregation. So if I take the aggregation layer now, you can see that there's 2 cables that are going from the edge, from the aggregation back to our core service. And what that means is link aggregation. What we can do with link aggregation, we can take one cable and turn it into 2 cables, but it's essentially just one physical connection that we're looking at. So we're aggregating them. And on our switches, you can have up to 8 cables. And that means that it's an 8 gigabit connection between your core. If one of those cables goes down, you've still got 7 cables left. So you've got some redundancy there. Now you'll also look at the core, and we can do other technologies like VRRP. And what that means is you can actually have 2 devices running at the same time. One of them goes down, all of the traffic will be able to route through the net for the next one. Likewise with our stacking. So in our stacking is basically taking 5 switches of the same series, or maybe 2, 3 switches, however many you want. As long as it's the same series, what we can do is we can physically cable them together in such a way that it becomes one device on the network, one IP address that you have to manage. Makes it really nice and easy. So for example, if you're in education and you've got 27 switches around, you could probably turn that into maybe 3 or 4 IP addresses instead. And it makes management far, far easier.
Excellent. Right. So back over to Mark now. Craig is just blowing us away with some fantastic technical knowledge there. But we always think it's good to have an analogy for salespeople, because not everyone fully understands link aggregation and all those bits out there, but they still want a very fast and powerful network. And as we did with the slugs and the Formula One cars, Mark's got a great analogy here for the different switch types. So Mark's going to just quickly talk through that.
So I generally turn around and tell people when they're thinking of switching, and when they're thinking between the different levels of switching, they should look at the unmanaged switches as things like your VW camper van, things that are designed for light loads and for pottering around. And then you should look at the smart switches, and that's like your transit van, your Mercedes Sprinter, designed to hold a little bit more. It's a little bit more heavy duty, but then if you need a serious load shifted or a serious load moved, you'd look at your HGV van or your lorries and your trucks and things like that. It's just a very basic analogy that I tend to use, but at the same time I think it's a very good graphical representation of what some of these products can do. As per usual, if you're not sure of what switch you need within your network, please get in touch with myself or Craig, and we'll quite happily point you in the right direction.
Yeah, multiple trips in your transit van not as good as one trip in your big HGV truck is the yeah. Right. So final slide, just a quick question, a quick summary of D-Link and why us versus the competition, why us versus Zeiss or Netgear and everyone else, what makes D-Link unique.
So one of them is we've got a switch for all you need. So D-Link's got a very wide range of switching products, ranging from 10100 fast Ethernet to 1, 10 and 40 gigabits products. We've got a wide range of PoE enabled devices, and we've got all sorts of really cool stuff that we can help you with. We've got end-to-end switching products, so we can help you from the edge to the core of a network. And also, most of our switches are Tolly verified or Tolly certified, and we can get some of that information on the performance of the switching compared to other products out there, and we're always happy to share that information. Here in the UK, D-Link have a dedicated team of account managers. I'm a part of that team. And we have a dedicated team of technical pre-sales engineers, so we can help you with all questions and queries around our products, but also we can help with things like stock availability, and we can help you plan projects and plan things that you're working on and help you within that timeline that you need. We've got a VIP partner program, and some of the benefits include things like deal registration. We've got exclusive promos running from them partners, as well as exclusive discounts. We're going to be launching things like cloud management options, and we're going to be having things like Nucleus switches and a dedicated portfolio of switches for cloud management, as well as the Nucleus access points. And you guys will be able to manage your customers' networks wherever you are via the cloud.
On the beach.
Preferably. To summarise all this, we've got a very good dedicated portfolio for the sort of small to medium-sized business. We've got a very competitive enterprise portfolio offering, but also something very new to D-Link in the last, I would say, 12 months is we've launched a range of industrial or ruggedized switches, and that can help you with some of them projects that are harder to reach as such, or that might require a more sturdy product. Again, if you've got questions, shall I say, you're more than welcome to send us a quick question, and we're quite happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, if you've got any warehouses or industrial type sites. Our industrial switch portfolio is pretty good. So talk to us about that. That's great. So that's pretty much everything we've got. That was a tight 25 minutes there. Hope we didn't bore everyone too much.
Hopefully they're still awake.
They're still awake out there. A couple of questions.
Yeah, so we've got one here from Alan. Another Alan.
There's another one.
He says, what's the difference between PoE and PoE Plus? I must have seen it on the slide. Very good question. So PoE and PoE Plus is the same thing. It actually is, it uses an Ethernet cable, comes out of a PoE switch. Now the difference is the amount of voltages that are coming out of it. So PoE generally goes up to 15.4 watts. And PoE Plus goes up to 30 watts. So there are things like cameras and access points that are more higher powered, and generally they take a little bit more power to take. And that's what PoE Plus is. It's just a little bit more wattage. You do have to look at your switches and the amount of budget or what they can give out, because obviously it's going to take more power, so you need a switch that's going to have enough budget. Say, for example, you've got 16 access points, and they're all PoE powered. You look at how much there is in terms of your wattage that you have, you divide it by how much each of your access points take, and it gives you an idea of how much it's going to use. Likewise, if you do the same again, if something's higher powered, it's going to take more. You might be able to have less access points on that particular switch. But what we do is things called max power switches, which means that we can actually have 30 watts per port, all of the ports. So say for 24 ports, you'd be able to actually power all of your access points if they're high powered. So there's options that we can do, and we can always help with measuring up in terms of calculations if you need to.
Excellent. Any more questions out there? Anybody wants to ask anything before we sign off? Okay. Just to say as well, we're giving away one of our brand new DIR 1960 routers for anybody who's managed to make it all the way through the webinar. We'll be in touch with the winner in the next few days. We're planning on doing these every 2 weeks. Next week's one is around mesh Wi-Fi and how it relates to our EXO routers and cover products. And then tentatively pasted in for the 1st of October, we should have some exciting developments in and around our nucleus product, which Craig is very excited about. So excited that he's going to be doing the webinar just with me. No pesky salespeople. It's just going to be a real technical rundown of the product and everything. So all that's left for me to do is just to say thank you to everyone for turning up. Anyone who hasn't turned up will get emailed this through to them via GoToMeeting. And we will be starting up a YouTube channel where we'll be uploading all the webinars, and we'll also be filming a few videos talking about our VIP Plus scheme, which if you're not a member of, it's free to join, so sign up today and you will get access to all of our promos and various other bits, and you'll get a lovely email from myself, so that's more than worth it. Okay, so thanks to everyone for listening. Goodbye from Craig and goodbye from Mark.
See you next time.
See you next time.